Good morning, everybody. Sorry for keeping you waiting a little while, but I'm sure it's going to be well worth it. We're obviously very, very pleased to have Secretary Clinton here today to be part of the panel that you're going to hear from, and in a moment I'll introduce the other members of the panel. I just wanted to say a few words very briefly about the university, just to remind you, of course, if you don't already know, and I'm sure just about everyone ought to know, Hillary Clinton's name, of course, is attached to our School of Law. We're very proud that Hillary was willing to endorse our School of Law, and the reason she's done that, of course, is that work we do there speaks to the values that Hillary has. We do a lot of work on children's rights, a lot of work on human rights. These are the sorts of things that were of interest to Hillary, both in her legal career, but also, of course, when she was a politician. In the audience today, of course, we have lots of people from around the region, of course, many women who've been entrepreneurs in their own right, and of course, we're also fortunate that many of you are our alumni. I learnt today that we have 36 student startup businesses created just since January this year. It gives you a real indication of the work that the university does to try and encourage and inspire our students to think about what they might do in their future lives. And this talk is, of course, all about Gutsy Women and the women who've achieved things, and it's fantastic that for once, it doesn't always happen, of course, we're getting women up here to talk about the sorts of values we should inspire in our students. I think it's really important to make sure that as much as we can, we hold those values close to our heart. And of course, at the university, we take diversity, inclusion, and equality in all of their forms very, very seriously. I'm not going to say any more than other than thank you for coming along. We've got a number of our partners are in the audience tonight, some of our big partners, but also some of our very small partners. We try our best to work with industries that are large, but also some of the very smallest SMEs as well. I think at any one time, we believe that we're working with well over 2,000 or 3,000 businesses. So it gives you a real indication of the sorts of entrepreneurial work that this institution engages in. So with no further ado, I'm going to first of all hand over to one of our very own Gutsy women, Grace, who's head of our student union.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. I'm honoured to have been asked to speak at this event and to have this amazing opportunity to listen and be inspired by these Gutsy women. As cliché as this may seem, Swansea has always felt like a home away from home for me. It's the longest I've lived away from my family, but it's helped me grow into the person I am today. My 3-year degree in geography was full of adventures and challenges, but it encouraged me to want to make a difference in other students' lives. My first step in achieving this goal was to work for the Students' Union as student staff, where I was fortunate enough to gain a work placement with the welfare officer in place then. And I knew at that time that I wanted to give back to the student environment that had given me so much. The opportunity then came to run for the position of welfare officer, and with hard work and dedication, I was successful and elected. All positions are only for 1 year, and yet I knew that halfway through my term, there was so much more that I wanted to do, and that inspired me to run as the president. Another campaign followed, and I was successful in being elected as the president of the Students' Union. I took up this position in June and have accomplished so much already, such as getting in a quiet room in the new space on the new building on Bay Campus. However, there is so much more I want to do before next summer. Standing here before you is one such amazing opportunity. I am proud to be part of such a diverse full-time officer team, and the first ever all-female team in our Students' Union history. As with any job, we face our fair share of struggles, but continue to do our best to exceed other people's expectations, showing everyone that we are capable of so much more. I am extremely lucky to be part of such a supportive and driven team. We encourage each other to thrive, to challenge ourselves, and to accomplish anything we set out to do, and so much more along the way. As a university and a students' union, we strive to give students the best possible experience, both academically and socially. I myself have been fortunate enough to make friends for life, both amongst my course mates and my work colleagues. And I know that this is the same for my peers. The university and the Students' Union consistently score high on surveys concerning student satisfaction. It gives students the chance to share their experiences, and it's earned us the What Uni University Award, University of the Year Award for the second time in 5 years. This positive response is successfully achieved through the strong partnership that we have with the university and their aim to incorporate the student voice at all levels. The involvement of students is facilitated not just with the elected full-time and part-time officers, but the 400 plus student reps across the 8 colleges. Another example of the successful collaborative work within the institution. But it is more than just academic opportunities. Other pillars to student life are sports, societies, and volunteering. There's over 50 sports teams and 150 societies just within the Students' Union that are run by volunteers. But there's also other volunteering opportunities as well, such as Discovery. All of these opportunities allow fellow students to teach their peers about accountability, time management, and work-life balance. These are just a few of the skills that students learn in roles that are then applicable in the workplace. The leadership and entrepreneurial skills of our students that our students earn are the reason why Swansea is top 5 for graduate employability. And another reason why students enjoy their time here is the supportive environment in which they're allowed to study. We are fortunate enough that earlier this year, the Welsh Government put aside £2.3 million for mental health and wellbeing. I was a part of the team that wrote the successful bid that will see Swansea University, the University of Wales Trinity St David, and local FE colleges embark on a new support network called Connect. This project is a fantastic opportunity to get staff and students trained with the skills they need to be able to better help and support their peers. This focus on student welfare and well-being is extremely important, and I'm sure that the work the Students' Union and the university are doing will have a positive impact on our students as we prepare them for the working world. Student welfare has always been incredibly important to me, and it is amazing to be able to put into action skills that I've learned and in turn support the students that I'm in contact with every day. The support that the university has offered with this project is appreciated, and hopefully we will continue to work towards improving the university experience for current and future students. I am grateful for the adventures I've had during my studies, my time as an officer and president, and I will be proud to call myself a Swansea alumnus in years to come. Thank you. Diolch.
Thank you very much indeed, Grace. So now, I'd like to introduce to the stage, first of all, Anna Jones from Skye. Some of you may be aware that we're very proud that Skye have sponsored a new master's programme in the School of Law. These will be Clinton scholars looking at a whole range of global challenges. So we're very pleased indeed to introduce Anna. She's been a Sky News presenter for the last 14 years, presented every programme on the channel at some point during her life there, and she's been interviewing a whole range of different politicians and celebrities, so she's a great choice to chair our panel for us today. At the moment, she is a presenter of the News at 10 at the weekend. So please welcome to the stage, Anna Jones. And then to join the panel, we have Professor Laura McAllister, one of our honorary fellows. She's a Welsh academic, a former international footballer and sports administrator, having chaired Sports Wales. Currently, she's Professor of Public Policy and the Governance of Wales at the Wales Governance Centre at Cardiff University. Let's welcome to the stage Laura McAllister. Next, we have Kirsty Williams. Kirsty, of course, is a Welsh politician. She's been an Assembly member of the National Assembly of Wales since 1999. She's been leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats for a period of time, and she's currently, of course, the Welsh Minister for Education. Kirsty Williams. Next, we have Elwen Evans, of course, one of our members of the university. Elwen heads up our law school. She's one of the UK's leading lawyers. She's led a number of high-profile cases, and she's also a Crown Court recorder. To the stage, Elwen. And of course, last but certainly not least, we have Secretary Clinton, who's going to be here to talk to us about her book and be interviewed by Anna and listen to the other panel members talk about the issues that are raised in there. I don't need to say any more, I'm sure, about Hilary having served as Secretary of State, Senator from New York, practicing lawyer, of course, in the past, and most importantly, author of the book that we're here to discuss today. Please welcome to the stage, Hillary Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. And it is a wonderful treat for me to be back here at Swansea. It was in this room 2 years ago that I received an honorary degree, and the incredible relationship with this university, and particularly the law school, began. And I want to thank the staff and faculty of the university and the law school, especially Vice Chancellor Boyle and Dean Evans. I'm also very pleased to be here during the time when the announcement of this new exciting partnership between Swansea and Sky Communications has been announced, and for me, the fact that we have 5 scholars here already from around the world is just another indicator of the global reach that Swansea has. I look forward to joining this discussion about Gutsy Welsh Women. I think it's fair to say that I have some Gutsy Welsh women and men, but focusing on women today, in my own lineage. I learned on a previous visit that my grandfather's family on my father's side and my great-grandfather's family on my mother's side came to the United States from Wales at different times on the same vessel, the SS Alaska. And my grandmother, Hannah Jones, was a formidable Welsh woman, and I think about her a lot when I'm here at Swansea. So Chelsea and I have published a book we wrote earlier this year called The Book of Gutsy Women, and it arose out of a conversation that she and I have been having since she was a little girl, talking about inspirational, courageous, resilient women, role models. And it's filled with stories of women we've known, women we've never met but deeply admire, women who have redefined what's possible not only for themselves, but for all of us. There are 103 women in this book. We were seized with regret throughout the entire process that we could not include every woman who has inspired us with her tenacity and commitment to improving our world. But it's been a joy to meet a lot of the women that we profiled along the trail of this book tour. And I'm thrilled that this book is inspiring people to think about all the gutsy women in their own lives, and indeed to find ways to be gutsier themselves. We dedicated the book to anyone who is searching for inspiration to live their own gutsy life. And I hope the stories you'll hear today from the amazing gutsy women on the stage, as well as some others we might tell, will give each of you, women and men, a chance to think about who inspires you and how in tumultuous times we need courage and resilience more than ever. So once again, I'm delighted to be here at Swansea, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thank you.
So hello everybody, welcome to all of you, welcome to all these fantastic panelists. Secretary Clinton, I'm going to start with you. You're here, as you said there, to celebrate your new book that you've written with your daughter, the Book of Gutsy Women, that we've got on display here. But you're also here to meet the new scholars of this new global scholarship that you've launched here at Swansea University through the law school, which of course has your name on it. So first of all, let's talk about them. Tell us what you're trying to achieve with these scholarships.
Well, these young women who are the first recipients of this scholarship are coming here to study in the law school to obtain additional skills, to broaden their understanding, to meet and network with people who will give them the confidence and the support that they are looking to achieve in order to make differences in their own countries and in the world. The 5 young women, and it's open to women and men, it was a very rigorous selection process, and more than 30 people were interviewed by Skype by representatives of the law school, Sky Communications, and my team, and then narrowed down to the 5 who were selected. A young woman from Zimbabwe, a young woman from Mongolia, a young woman from Montenegro, and 2 young women, totally on merit, from Wales. So they have a cross-section of interests, from protecting children, particularly online, from radicalization and extremism, doing more to address and deal with the refugee crisis that we've been seeing over the last several years, and such numbers of desperate people seeking refuge in my country and across Europe in particular, looking to figure out the best ways for corporations to emphasize human rights. How can they be partners in the struggle for social justice and human rights? Here in Wales, thinking through how social justice and human rights can be better pursued and modeled. Wales has a lot of opportunities because of your legal system and the changes that you're seeking, and just in the past week, I understand, Minister, the extension of the franchise to 16 and 17-year-olds. So there's a lot of real energy behind their experiences and their intellectual pursuits. So I'm thrilled that this scholarship has taken off, and I view it not only as something for these 5 young women, but really mutually for the law school and the university, and in furtherance of the idea that we need global education networks, that we all have much to learn from each other. And in a time when there's a turn toward nationalism and more insularity, which seems unlikely to succeed in the long term, but in the short term can have consequences, we all need to think about how we better define our interdependence and make it something that recognizes the diversity of the voices and experiences that we have here in Wales, across the UK, and indeed across the world.
So 5 very gutsy women. I can see them here in the front row. And in your book, you've celebrated the stories of other women, of other very gutsy women, but you yourself, how courageous and resilient do you think that you've had to be to get to the top?
Well, I think you do what you have to do when you have to do it. At least I hope that's the case, and a lot of the women in the book certainly exemplify that. I have been on a mission ever since I was a young woman to make a positive difference in the world. I never thought I would run for political office, but I was engaged in lawsuits on behalf of the rights of abused and neglected children, foster care children, trying to work with nonprofits, what we call NGOs, non-governmental organizations that were particularly focused on children and families and women and our rights and our needs. And so I've always felt like I was blessed. I had a very committed family. They valued education, which is why I'm so interested in expanding and supporting education here and in other places. So I felt like I was well equipped to take on the challenges that I either did take on or that I confronted. And that's one of the reasons why I hope this book gives some ideas to others, because although we don't write about ourselves, we write about our lives and how, in my case, my mother, whose maiden name was Howell, had a very strong emphasis on education because she never got to go to college. She was basically abandoned by her parents and then rejected by her grandparents. So by the age of 13, she was out working as a housekeeper and a babysitter in someone else's home. And I once asked her, I didn't realize this when I was a little girl, but when I was older and I knew about her own life, you know, I asked her what kept her going, because I just couldn't imagine being abandoned and rejected as she had been. And she said at critical points in her life, somebody showed her kindness. And so I think a lot of my motivation, my desire to make a difference really comes out of realizing that my mother made her own way, but it was with great trial and tribulation. And so if I can do something to, you know, give more people a chance to have better lives, that's what I've always wanted to do. And it takes courage, it takes resilience, but if you start from a base of love and support, it's somewhat, you know, easier to do than if you have to really build your life because no one else cared enough to give you those starts that you needed.
And Professor Elwen Evans, I read somewhere that you were once the only female barrister in the city. Is that right? So how tough a journey was it for you, would you say?
I was the only female barrister here for a while. And, you know, it seems pretty incredible. I remember going into the kitchen in Chambers. I'd just arrived. And someone who will be entirely nameless said that actually there were only, and forgive me, I'm not seeking to be in any way critical, but he said there's only two things that women are good for. And I mean, you know, I'm not that old. Honestly, I'm really not that old. And that was very much a mindset. Not many people necessarily articulated that view, but there was a sense, no doubt, of hostility. And I've been reflecting on the honour of sitting on this platform today, and make no mistake about it. It is a sense of, my goodness, what am I doing here in such significant, wonderful, and inspirational company? Because, you know, I am no model in any big sense around any of that, but it's such a privilege to be here. And actually, I think that sense of, gosh, me, why here, comes from those certain consequences of adversity and hostility where people don't want you to be there. But following on from that, what really worries me is when I was head of Chambers and when I left to move on to the university, actually there were more women in Chambers than there were men. Not deliberate, it was something that had happened on merit. But actually what really worries me at the moment when I look around the world is we've achieved that. How easy it would be to slip back. I so hope that nobody finds themselves in the kitchen of their place of work with a colleague saying, there's only two things that you as a woman are good for. I so hope that doesn't happen. But, you know, any part of our journey that we can take together to move away from that mentality and that world has to be worth even me coming up here and whittering on in my fairly inconsequential and incoherent way. So sorry.
Kirsty Williams, what about you? I think you joined a political party when you were 15. You're now Education Minister. Do you feel that you encountered obstacles along the way because of your gender?
Well, I joined a political party at 15, but I had been a real pain to my school authority. My first campaign I ever ran was because girls had to wear a certain colour piece of uniform where boys had choice. And me and my friend Beverly Thomas, who lived here in Swansea, we ran a campaign to allow girls to have equality of uniform choices with boys. But like Elwen, at that time, when I was fighting over the colour of a cagoule, I never believed I'd end up making law, actually, about the affordability of school uniform, recognising that for some families that's a real issue and can really affect a child's well-being if they can't go to school in their correct uniform. So it's been quite a journey. Over the years, I've been very lucky to have been in the right place at the right time with the formation of the National Assembly for Wales. But I've also been really lucky when those moments of adversity have come, and they have come, and there have been similar conversations that Elwen has experienced, that there has been other people that have helped me find my guts and my courage. Because if I'm brutally honest, there were times when that courage and guts was missing, and I've been very fortunate at key moments in my life. There have been people in my life who have been there to help me find it, to remind myself that I do have it, and to make some progress. But being the youngest woman elected to the Assembly in 1999 was really challenging. But I also am lucky to serve in a political institution that has a great gender balance. Not perfect, but significant numbers of women alongside me. And the sisterhood across party has been one of the sustaining factors of my career. And although on TV people think that politicians knock chunks out of each other, behind the scenes I've been very fortunate again from across the political spectrum to have women who've been incredibly encouraging each step of the career that I've taken. And I think that's my lesson, is that sometimes you have to be careful of who you surround yourself with and make sure that you've got people there that will, if you're faltering, will give you that push that you need to find that guts and to find that courage.
And Professor Laura McAllister, you've reached the top of several fields, from sport through to politics and academia as well. Did you feel you had to be gutsy to reach the top in each of those areas?
Well, I think I didn't recognise what gutsy was really, but I came from a pretty ordinary family, just down the road in Bridgend. My family were from Maesteg, and my biggest influence was always my mother and my grandmother, who now looking back I see were proper gutsy, or we'd probably say bolshi, wouldn't we, in Wales, women. And they were very ordinary women, from very ordinary working class background, but encouraged us as children to fulfil any of our dreams and any of our aspirations. And I actually think that's quite a Welsh thing, that there's a real sense of potential and possibility. And, nothing saddens me more than to look at some of our children in Wales now who haven't had that kind of family encouragement to do things. But I think reflecting ahead of this panel, I was thinking to myself that one of the things that's probably made me better equipped to do the things I do now is all about taking myself less seriously. So I think when you're a woman in sport or in politics or in academia, initially you feel like you've got to take yourself very seriously because you're a minority. I've sat at sports governing bodies where I've been the only woman there. Funny aside, when I, for a long time, was the only woman on the Football Association of Wales. We had a conversation about improving the governance based on diversity, and a member who shall remain nameless said something like, well, we've managed all these, bear in mind I'd been a member for about 8 years at that point, we've managed all these years without any women, so why should we change now? And I stuck my hand up and I said, there is another bit to the story. I said, what about me? And he said, we don't think of you as a woman, Laura, you're a footballer. I don't know whether I should be flattered by that or not, but I think the point about not taking yourself seriously is quite an important one, actually, because the journey that women take through any power route means that there will be a lot of pitfalls and a lot of problems and a lot of big, difficult scenarios. And I think if you take yourself less seriously and go home to your family and your friends, especially if they're your old school friends who'll bring you crashing back down to earth in no time, then it gives you a sense of balance, really. And also in doing that, it encourages other women, especially girls who are ordinary and from ordinary backgrounds, but really are extraordinary, to take the same path that you followed. So that's been my definite life lesson on that.
And Secretary Clinton, what about inspiration? Because you mentioned in your book that when you were growing up, you knew very few women who worked outside of the home. So did you have any role models that you looked up to? Where did you find your inspiration from?
Well, it's true that when I was a young girl, I didn't know any women who worked outside the home except my teachers and our public librarians. And that's one of the reasons I think my mother took me to the library every week to check out books, some of which were actually about women, you know, biographies about women in history. Why she was encouraging to me to read magazine articles about Amelia Earhart or Helen Keller, or women who had come to be well known because of what they had conquered or achieved. So I give my mother, as I do in most things, a lot of credit for helping to broaden my understanding, my horizon. But I just want to quickly say, you know, when Elwen was saying that about what it was like practicing law, I remember very well, going into courtrooms, going into lawyer meetings, and having, similar kinds of things said to me. I remember going into court one day, and, a judge said, "Ma, you look so pretty today. Stand up here and twirl around and show everybody." And, some of these comments came from men who, literally, if they were attached to a lie detector test and were asked, "Do you think that you are at all prejudiced toward women?" they would answer no, and they would be judged as truthful. Because a lot of what they said was so culturally and socially acceptable that, they loved their wives, their daughters, their granddaughters, but there was just something about being in any professional setting that was difficult for them, and therefore we were often pointed out or talked about. And I think too, the point that Laura made, I learned over many years to take good faith, legitimate criticism seriously, but never personally. So if someone had a point to make when I was practicing law or when I was engaged in some advocacy work or in public life, if they were saying something that I thought came from a legitimate place of learning for me, I would try to take it on board. But so much of the criticism aimed at women, both in person, but now increasingly online, is really meant to just knock you down and keep you down, meant to undermine you, meant to demean and degrade you. Unfortunately, the atmosphere online is heavily misogynistic, because apparently the people, and it's predominantly, if not exclusively, men who spend their time going after women of prominence in whatever field they are, just can't let it go. They just have to be out there, and what they say is often vile. And when I was in London over the last days, a number of people told me about women not standing for Parliament this time because of the threats that they have received. And it is really particular to them. Threats of death and terrible attacks, including going after their families, in particular mentioning their children. So I met with one woman who is deciding she's not running, and she said, "I just can't take it." And it is a terrible loss. It's a loss to democracy if anybody is intimidated out of running, and disproportionately the people choosing not to run in the first instance or for re-election are women. And I don't know, have you encountered or heard about that too, Kirsty?
It's a very prominent feature of the current general election that we find ourselves in. And although within the context of the National Assembly, we're probably less exposed to it, I know that myself and female colleagues have been subject to those kinds of attacks. I have received death threats. I've been told to my face that I deserve to be shot because of my views on Europe. A gentleman has recently been convicted for sending me and other female politicians malicious mail that included white powder, which could have been a chemical attack, and that gentleman has just been sent to prison for that offence. And it's certainly getting worse. I think it's worse in two ways. There are platforms now. I dare say these men existed previously. They just didn't have a way of making their views more publicly known. So those platforms are now available. But there does seem to have been a change in the discourse, and it's almost now seen as acceptable as a politician. You have to put up with this. This is just part of your day job now. I'm not quite sure how we put that genie back in the bottle and how we re-establish a more respectful discourse. But it is a real challenge, and it's getting worse, and it's harder to protect those around you from it also. So when my children were little, they weren't on Facebook, they weren't on social media, they're now teenagers, so they are on these things, they see these things that are written about their mother, and actually some people decide to take out their mother's politics on them too, which is really unacceptable, but and it's getting worse all of the time, and I am fearful, like you, that potentially good candidates and good politicians will just say enough is enough. That's not a price I'm willing to pay to continue to participate in this job. And I'm not sure that we've got the answer to how we get back to something that was better. And when women call it out, then there's also a backlash. So you get labelled with the moany woman, the snowflake, the person that's not up to it. If you can't stand the heat, get out to the kitchen, or in your case, Kirsty, get back to the kitchen. So you get really worried about, should I call it out all the time? Because if I'm calling out every incident, I do nothing else but call these things out. And if you do, a colleague of mine, Leanne Wood, was recently sanctioned for swearing at somebody on Twitter. But I suspect if a man had used that language, it would have been fine. But because she wasn't conforming to a feminine ideal about how a woman should behave, especially a woman in public life, then I think people are probably harder on her than they would have been on a male colleague.
Do you have any insights into why you think women seem to get attacked more?
Well, I have a theory which I think lots of other people have put forward as well, which is that the reason that we're at this moment, I think, in terms of women in politics and women in public life more generally, is because now we're a threat. Up until now, we haven't been a threat because we haven't been there in large enough numbers. But I think there's always a moment in any political discourse where something becomes problematic. And if you think about it, 3/4 of the jobs globally of any kind of power are held by men still, but that quarter is quite significant. And Kirsty knows, nearly half of the assembly is female, and I think misogyny has got worse as the number of women has grown. And the reason for that is that power is a scarce resource, and I think men who can't appreciate the value of diversity feel that women are a threat in that environment, and that then creates a kind of cascade effect through society, which legitimizes some of the behavior that lots of us have been subject to.
And Secretary Clinton is a real challenge now, isn't it, to persuade people to go into politics in this environment, men and women. But how important is it that there are women at the top? How important are role models in persuading people who are starting out in their careers that it's worth aiming for?
I think it's critically important. And I agree with the comment that, for some people, it's likely that they do view power as a limited resource. I have a different idea, which is, we all should be trying to increase the amount of freedom and autonomy and therefore empowerment that people have over their own lives and how they make decisions, so that we should think about it in a much more expansive way. But unfortunately, that is not the case. People are threatened. And one of the women we profile is Sally Ride, the first American woman astronaut who went into space. And she had a saying that was certainly, I thought, worth including. You cannot imagine what you cannot see. And not every woman's going to want to be a footballer or a minister or a law professor and dean or a political candidate. But for those girls and women who do, they should have the same role models that men do. And having practiced law and having been in politics, the variety of male styles and presentations are infinite. I tried cases, I campaigned with and against men of all sizes and shapes and, speaking styles. But for women, it's viewed threatening if you don't fit into some preconceived, almost DNA imprinted look and behavior. And that's what has to be broken open so that, women of all sizes and styles and speaking abilities can have the same opportunities to present themselves in whatever field they choose. I am absolutely convinced that something has been unleashed because of social media. Because it's absolutely, Kirsty's absolutely right, all kinds of hatred and bias has been with us from the beginning of time. That is no surprise. But something about the amplification of the hatred attracts even more people. And so what was kind of pushed underground over a long period of civilization, where that's inappropriate, you don't say those things, and we will take action against you. We will hold you accountable if you are threatening or attacking. And of course, I can't help but think about Joe Cox, who was the target and victim of a political assassination. And so when you think about what's different, part of what's different is the broad reach and the anonymity of social media. And I think unless we come up with some better ideas about how to contain that, this is going to take a while, if it does at all, burn out. So that, we do have, unfortunately now in today's world, leaders who encourage that kind of hatred, who applaud those sorts of attacks. And, you asked early on, well, how do you find courage and resilience? Well, you have to know that what they're saying about you is not true. That helps. But you also do need to be surrounded with people who keep reinforcing and supporting you as you go forward. And I think that there's no easy answer. We need different kind of leadership. Look, we can have enormous disagreements, and we will. That's also human nature. You all are in the midst of a continuing disagreement over to leave or not to leave. That's fine. But when it becomes so vicious and when it unleashes such incredible vitriol against people who are on the other side, that goes too far. And we cannot sustain a democracy in my country or yours or other places if we think it's all or nothing, my way or the highway. The line is drawn. You're on the wrong side. Compromise is a dirty word. That's true for politics in general, but that's especially true for the role of women in politics. Because we often do find ourselves trying to find that common ground. Okay, what will make sense to you, and how do we come up with something that will actually work? That role being squeezed out, being essentially held in contempt, makes it more difficult, I think, for a lot of women to feel good about running for office, to hold office, because they want to be problem solvers, and that's not as welcome as it used to be.
And we touched on, Professor Evans, the inspiration that role models can give, but Secretary Clinton there is also talking about the vital issue of shaping the narrative as well. If you are at the top, in government, in the law, on the board of companies, it's not just being an inspiration, it's actually being part of the conversation.
Absolutely crucially important being part of that conversation. And I see my role very much here. I don't have a big external profile. Yes, I may have done some cases that had external profile, but it wasn't my voice speaking. And so I don't feel that I have a part of a broader conversation. I see my role, and I think that it is, I hope it's an important role, as part of a smaller community. There's a wonderful Welsh expression, dyn e milltir y sgwâr, the person of their own square mile, and how important it is to seek to influence and shape where you can, within that small ambit which is your environment. And for me, insofar as I have a part in this conversation. I see it in seeking to influence, albeit on a very local level, people, because at the end of the day, of course it has to be top down. Of course we have to have role models out there in the political world, in the sporting world, in government. But ultimately, most of us aren't going to be in that roles, possibly because we don't have the guts, in a way, to go out there in such a clear and focused way. So I do see the importance of that narrative, and that narrative, I think, also has to come bottom up, and that's when it becomes powerful. You've got the role models at the top, you've got the bottom up to actually seek to motivate people and to identify. And it sounds a little grandiose, and that's absolutely not what I seek to do, to sound in any way grandiose. But yesterday, when Secretary Clinton came to the law school and actually spent time with students, with the Clinton Sky-supported scholars, and actually with some of our other students, to actually have that opportunity of seeing in action role modelling, but also seeing Secretary Clinton in the square mile, seeing her in the environment with people where she knows, she experiences, and can motivate. What a powerful message. Actually, I have to say, we called by one class that weren't expecting you, and the look on their faces when in the middle of an advocacy class, they have one of the world's arch advocates was awesome. So it's a two-way thing. Your question about narrative, absolutely, but the narrative also comes from all sorts of different directions as well.
Yeah, so important to kind of on a
Could I
local-
just add something to what Elwen said, because I think this is a really profoundly important point. We can't just leave it to the politicians and to the government leaders to deal with some of the challenges that we're facing now. Some of the coarse behavior, some of the bullying, some of the name-calling and scapegoating. We do need, within that square mile, or that local square, we do need to be modeling ourselves how to address that. You know, we've had an explosion of bullying in American schools. And I don't mean it as a partisan comment. Much of it is inspired by the behavior of our president, who is just a 24/7 bully on all kinds of issues and with respect to all sorts of people. And so that is the role model. That is the highest office in our land, and that is the role model. And children, being children, are picking up on those cues. And so we're seeing a lot of in-person bullying, and we're seeing online bullying among peer groups of people. So I think Elwen's point is so critically important. We have to hope that, as you were saying, that the top-down accepts the responsibility, becomes more disciplined in conducting civil discourse with respect to the debates about the biggest issues that we all are confronting. But we also have to hope that from the grassroots up, people are also speaking out and speaking up and not accepting behavior that crosses the line into not just rudeness, but threatening.
And Kirsty Williams, what about what the Welsh Government is doing? Because they are pushing for a feminist government. You've got a cabinet that has more women than men as of last December. What difference do you think that makes? Do you think that message is important?
I think leadership is incredibly important, and I was very proud to serve alongside a male First Minister who stated his intention of making Wales a feminist country, a country where it was fantastic to be a woman and to be a girl. And I think that's when we also have to look for allies outside of gender. So obviously there is great power in women working together, but it's also to look for allies outside of that. Some of the people that have been most practically supportive and helpful in my life have been men who have wanted to ensure that people have had an opportunity. As a government, and in my particular role, we're taking this back to the very essence of what is education for, and moving and changing our curriculum. So For the first time in our nation's history, in 2022, Wales will have its own curriculum for our school system, and it is a curriculum that is based on 4 purposes. What are the types of individuals do we want to leave our education system? What are the knowledge, skills and attributes that those young people will have as a result of spending time in a Welsh school? And that is about being healthy and confident. It's also about being ethical and informed, ready to be a citizen, yes, of Wales, but also a citizen of the world, and how to be a creative contributor. So one of the things I think that we can do in government, and I'm determined to do, is to create a school system that allows us, yes, to talk about knowledge and giving children knowledge, but also to create that space for our teachers to talk about empathy, to talk about resilience, confidence, respect for other people's views, to be able to debate, yes, but to do so in a way that is respectful and actually delivers outcomes. And I couldn't agree more on the point of one of the things that I think not only the misogyny online that will drive women out of politics is women want to give of their time and to do it effectively and efficiently. They want to achieve something as a result of it. So for the government, whether that's in the world of education or the world of economic development, looking to provide people with the skills that they need to be successful economically, or whether it's the environment, because often it is poorer communities and women in poorer communities that are at the forefront of poor environmental conditions. The government is determined to take action. But I'm really excited about the prospect of our new curriculum and how our new curriculum can add to this agenda.
Professor McAllister, I'm interested in that as well, because obviously the curriculum will apply to boys and girls. How important is it to get boys on board with this conversation from a young age?
I think it's absolutely fundamental. I mean, we can see already that girls are socialised out of doing things by the time they reach school. I mean, I would be an advocate of doing more preschool, in all honesty. I mean, I've argued that very strongly in sport, because I've seen girls who get to school at 5 and are already told that football and rugby are not for them, And in their minds, they probably accept that because they haven't had the right acclimatisation. So I think, preschool is important, but the work that Kirsty and the government are doing around the curriculum is fundamental, because if you stop and think about how you deal with any of the societal problems there are out there, we need long-term incremental change, and that only comes really generationally, and we only get generational change through education and schools. So I think it's absolutely right that we prioritise that in Wales as a fundamental.
Because it's the current system that we have, we're talking about the effect of this on girls and women, but under no illusion of the damaging effect that it is having on our boys and young men. I recently visited one of our secondary schools, and some 15-year-old boys were asked to come and talk to me about the work that they've been doing on relationship education. First of all, can you imagine how mortifying that must have been to come and speak to somebody that's old enough to be a mum about relationships? But what they had been working on a specific project, because they said there was lots of resources out there for girls, but very few resources out there for boys. And they'd been looking at issues of consent and what it meant to be a man, in inverted commas, in a relationship. And one of the young men said to me, I had a view from my friends and from social media about how I had to supposedly treat my girlfriend. And deep down inside, it was making me uncomfortable because I really like her and I really wanted to be kind. But everybody tells me I'm to behave in a certain way. What this project has told me is that it's fine for me to be kind and to be the person I want to be in this relationship. So unless we change the system, yes, to benefit girls and young women, but it's also there to help our young men and our boys lead healthier, more emotionally balanced lives as well. And that's why we've got to make these changes.
Secretary Clinton, would you agree with that, that it's...
100%. And I'm thrilled by all of the work that you're doing here in Wales on education. I remember when I was here, I think 2 years ago, or maybe my second visit, I was really introduced to a lot of the very thoughtful curriculum changes and emphasis on relationships and working together. That's a win-win, because it's going to give people not only, I hope, as this young man said, a better sense of how to be in a relationship with one other person, but also with all people, with everybody. I do think that a lot of the messages that our young people get, and particularly our young men, are so destructive. They're all about, domination and power and frankly, mistreatment. And it is, again, something that we try to shield our children, girls and boys. I now have, a granddaughter and 2 grandsons, and, I'm very aware of the challenges that they will face as they get older, because they are just immersed 24/7 in this information overload world because of social media and because of what they're exposed to. And I think a lot of families and a lot of very, well-meaning parents haven't caught up to what is happening in their children's brains and their emotional development. Because I would imagine that a lot of parents, if they were fully aware of the messages that their children are receiving, would be shocked, because, they're trying to raise, very, good young men and women, and here's how you treat people, and, don't hit your sister, and be nicer to people, and all of that. And then they let their kids go out into a world that is absolutely contradicting the messages that family and faith and good behavior, good manners are trying to counter. So we are conducting an experiment on the raising of children, the likes of which I don't think we've fully appreciated. And it certainly is far more than anything that I would have imagined. I think it's much harder being a parent today than it was even when I was. There's always been problems, always deprivation, poverty, violence, of course, but there's something else going on. And, brains are not fully developed until the age of 25. And if your brain is being addicted to social media and you are being fed almost, a consistent stream of messages, and it is not only affecting your behavior, it is literally affecting your brain development.
And that's why the research projects here with the Sky fellowships and the work at the law school is so important, because my understanding is that some of the work that will be going on here is to look at the impact of a digital world on the development of children. Because as policymakers, I don't think we have the evidence base necessarily, and we don't have all the answers, and that's why academic research in this field is so important, to be able to help inform a government policy and public policy as we go forward.
Just one final point on that, because the World Health Organization, in addition to national associations like the American Pediatric Association, have now begun to produce research that actually shows the impact of screen time, they call it screen time, on children's brain development, and therefore their behavior, their language acquisition. And there's a real irony here. The advice is, do not let children under 2 have screens, maybe occasionally fine, but not on any kind of ongoing basis. And even children between 2 and 12 in a minimalistic way. And one of the developments that I've been interested in following is how the people in Silicon Valley who have created this technology and who create the algorithms that addict you to the content, they don't let their children have screens. So we are just beginning to unpack this. And the research here at the university, the work of one of the scholars with the law school, looking at how online content can be so radicalizing. It can, and not just jihadist Islamist radicalization, right wing, left wing, any kind of wing that is appealing to the darker side, can be so seductive to young people across the globe. So when we talk about how do we instill resilience and courage and gutsiness, we have to really think about this, as both of you have said, going back to childhood now, and maybe more, more insistently and in ways we've never had to think about in the past.
And I know that we're short of time, but I want to have a little look to the future and get a sense of your optimism or otherwise about where things are headed. Secretary Clinton, in your book, you said, ensuring the rights and full participation of women and girls remains a big piece of unfinished business of the 21st century. What's the scale of it, do you think? And are we making progress? Do you feel any optimism?
Oh, I'm absolutely optimistic. And one of the attributes that goes through this book are the women who are optimistic. They've been, some of them have been subjected to horrific treatment, tortured, imprisoned, beaten, exiled, but they never lost their optimism about what needed to change and the role that they could play in that change. So I am optimistic, but I'm also realistic. And I think optimism should be rooted in reality. It should not be pie in the sky, everything's going to turn out all right, or the promises that are made are somehow going to be fulfilled despite all evidence to the contrary. And we've got to get back to, I would say, being evidence-based optimists. And one of the groups of women we profile in the book are vaccinators. Women who go out into dangerous parts of the world to vaccinate children because they want healthy children. They want to prevent the deaths of children and other kinds of long-lasting injury. And they're murdered at a high rate. But we included it also because the UK has lost your measles-free status. The United States is on the way to lose our measles-free status. So there's a form of optimism that is totally unfactual. There's not a shred of evidence to support it, but people optimistically say, I'm not going to vaccinate my children because I know more than the scientists do. I know more than 100 years of science and medical advancement. No, that's not optimism, that's ignorance. So we want evidence-based optimism. We want people to know that if we come together, we work together, we find whatever is gutsy within us that will enable us to keep going, we can make a positive difference. So I absolutely remain optimistic.
Do you feel that the balances are starting to be redressed at all, Professor Evans? How optimistic are you?
I am naturally enormously optimistic. But
nobody would have guessed that. No.
But I do think that we are going through a very difficult time at the moment. And, far be it from me to express any opinion out with my area of influence and knowledge, really. But I can't help but feel that the risks to that which I perceive as central, the importance of liberal democracy, is actually in a dangerous, troubling part of development. And so, yes, of course, I'm personally enormously optimistic, but actually looking at the outside, gosh, don't we need the really fabulous gutsy women that we read about in the book, that we know about in our lives, that we have actually here? The reality is that some of our Sky-supported Clinton scholars actually have already been engaging in work in their own countries, which potentially puts them at risk. My goodness, are we not privileged that there are people who are prepared to do that? And so, yes, against that backdrop of concern and worry for the things that I hold absolutely dear in terms of democracy, that liberal democracy, that civility and civilness of discourse. And allow me just a little riff. We call our MPs honourable members. Honourable. I'm not quite sure what honourable means, but it's a whole range of really important characteristics. Truthfulness, kindness, empathy, a willingness to listen. It's all of that wrapped into a word which is a bit nebulous. And I worry that our whole dialogue is losing that sense and substance and style of honourableness. And so whatever we can do in our little parts, my little part of the world, your big global presence, to seek somehow to ensure that that optimism lands well at the other side of this very troubling period of world existence.
Kirsty Williams.
I'm a huge believer in the fact that the arc will always bend towards progress. But I think that the progress that we thought we'd all made, whether that be with regards to rights for women, rights for our LGBT community, rights for our black and minority ethnic community, I think they're very fragile. And perhaps they're not deeply rooted and embedded as we all thought that they were. So optimistic, yes, but I think we have to be incredibly vigilant at the moment, because I think these are things that are under attack, they are under pressure, but ultimately, even on the days where you think you've taken 2 steps backwards, that arc is still pushing us towards progress. Optimistic, yes. Vigilant, absolutely.
And finally, Professor McAllister on
Well,
this.
I agree with all of that. You know, we're in the middle of an election campaign here, you know, which is going to be completely sloganized populism, where both left and right, by the way, you know, and that mirrors a lot of what's gone on in other parts of the world, of course. And there is the danger, isn't there, when we're in these kind of populist times, that a powerful leader is revered in some shape or form, and that becomes more appealing than it should be. But I'm optimistic in the sense that I think there are enough people who can see through this as well. And at times of crisis, you know, good people come through, I think, even more so than at any other time. And some of those good people, I hope, will be women, because, you know, women do tend to have those values that Elwen mentioned a moment ago, really rooted in their normal family lives. And I think there are things we can do as women as well, you know, because we talk as if, you know, women leaders are the people who are standing up on platforms like this or leading organisations, but most really effective women leaders are women at home and women in communities who are doing wonderful things that we don't hear a lot about. And they're the women who really have those values encompassed in everything that they do. So I kind of, another Welsh phrase is pethau bychan, little things, you know. And we underestimate how important little things are. So calling people out when they insult our colleagues in the assembly, and taking some stick, by the way, for calling it out, and encouraging girls to challenge boys in their schools and so on. But the more of those little things we can do, the more resonance it will eventually build, and the more likely we are to have a proper challenge to the kind of nonsense populism in politics that we're living through now.
Does this all make you want to just think, I'm just going to go for it, I'm going to run again?
No, I think it makes me more determined, though, to, you know, support women like those on this panel and to speak out, because it's in a role as citizen that I think all of us have the opportunity to you know, really stand up for what we do believe. And Elwen's very eloquent defense of liberal democracy needs to be heard over and over and over again, because I think that democracy is under tremendous pressure and stress from internal discord that we ourselves have to address, and from external attacks in the cyber world in particular, but also just, you know, ordinary propaganda and other tried and true tactics to subvert democracies from the outside. So there's more than enough work for all of us to do, and it doesn't require being in elective office to do it. It requires that we all just take stock of where we are and what we value, and be willing to, you know, maybe be a little gutsy.
Okay. Well, I've got a few questions here from the audience. I think I've only got about 5 minutes, so we'll get through what we can of them. The first one is from Grace Hannaford, who's the president of Swansea University Student Union, as you know. And her question is, what's the best piece of advice you could give to your younger self?
Shall I go? I don't mind starting with that. I think the best piece of advice I had from somebody was, first of all, not to take things too seriously and oneself too seriously, and also that things will pass, because I think when we're in the middle of terrible times, and there are lots of awful experiences that we all have as leaders in our field. It becomes very difficult to see the progress, but, you know, after a matter of time, one looks back at them and thinks, did I really take that as seriously as I did? And I think that comes with experience, but it's a good lesson, I think, for younger people to understand that the rhythms of public office will probably have more downs than they will ups, and conditioning oneself to be able to deal with those is really important.
Anyone else, any top tips that you'd like to pass on?
I would tell my younger self not to be in such a hurry and actually just enjoy a little bit more of it rather than constantly striving for the next thing. So be a bit more mindful, but also trust your gut instinct. That first instinct is probably the right one. And when I have made mistakes, and boy, oh boy, have I made mistakes, it's usually because I've not trusted my first gut instinct.
I think, from my point of view, not to take anything for granted, not to take health, friendships, relationships, opportunities, just to make the most and enjoy everything, but putting a focus on the future, but not to the extent of not actually taking those opportunities that one has. So, yeah, I think that really is quite powerful from my perspective. Nothing for granted, including, actually, liberal democracy.
I would just say amen. Those are all great words of advice. It's difficult to, knowing what we know now, to think back and say, oh, this is what I would tell my my younger self. But I think it is, you know, enjoy every day, enjoy the ride, enjoy the, you know, your surroundings. Don't get so preoccupied about what is ahead of you that you can't actually enjoy what you're doing right now. Because I think when you're young, you are in a hurry, a big hurry. You're not exactly sure how it's all going to play out, but you want to get there wherever it is you think you're heading. But have some joy along the way.
Fantastic. Let's try and squeeze in at least one more. Emma Friss and Emmanuel, who's Associate Director of Marketing, Recruitment and International, and her question is, what are your pet hates? It doesn't say who are your pet hates. It says, but we could cover that too, if you like.
Gosh, this is... Why am I starting? I don't know. I've got a lot of pet hates, actually. One of mine is people who talk too much. Maybe that's something to do with what Kirsty mentioned about being in a hurry, because, you know, I find I really like working with pacey people who don't talk too much. And they tend to be women, by the way, mostly. But I do struggle with people who are too verbose or who like meetings for the sake of it.
Oh, yeah, badly chaired meetings. Badly chaired meetings that go on like half an hour or an hour longer than they actually needed to go on. Though, yeah, I agree.
You're going to be thinking about that one all the way home.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, go on.
I really hate when I see or hear about someone who is trying to ignore science. I mean, I just have to. I mean, I just hate it. I hate it that we are in this point where, you know, all the work, the generations of work that has gone into, you know, making us healthier and more, you know, more able to live a longer life and all that comes with it. So on the health side, but really on anything else, it bothers me greatly. You know, people who say, well, yeah, okay, you think the world is round, but it's my opinion, it's flat. Well, I hate that.
And on that note, we are out of time, but I just want to say a huge thanks to what an amazing group of panellists. Thanks very much indeed, and thanks to everyone for coming. Thank you, that was great. So good. I guess we just go, do we? Yeah.